Hi, and welcome to this series of lessons on the parts of speech. My name is Ganesh, and in this first lesson, I'm going to give you a quick introduction to the 8 parts of speech. In the following lessons, we'll learn more in detail about each part of speech. Now, before we start, just remember, if you have any questions at all, you just have to let me know in the comments section below, and I will talk to you there. Okay, so first of all, what is a part of speech? Well, a part of speech is just the name given to a word based on the job that it does in a sentence. Think of parts of speech as being kind of like job titles. Just like a person can be a teacher or a doctor or a lawyer, a word can be a verb, an adjective, a noun, etc., depending on the job that it does in a sentence. And these can be really useful to learn because when you're studying grammar, you will come across terms like these. You will come across terms like nouns, verbs, and adjectives. And if you know what they mean, it can help you to speed up your study of grammar. All right, so how many parts of speech are there? There are 8 parts of speech, and we start by talking about the verb. We start with the verb because verbs are probably the most important words in the English language. And that is for 2 reasons. First, every sentence in English must have a verb. You cannot have sentences without verbs in English. And the second reason is that only verbs have tenses. Now, I'm sure you know about past tense, present tense, and future tense. That's how we talk about different times. And to do that, we change the forms of verbs. So verbs are really important. But what does a verb do? Well, a verb is a word that shows an action or a state. State means a situation. Now, for example, in the sentence, Dylan plays tennis 3 times a week. In this sentence, the verb is play because that's the action. And we're saying plays because for he, she, and it, we say plays. We add the S to the verb in the present tense. So Dylan plays. In this next sentence, I am a teacher. Can you tell me which is the verb? The verb is am. That's basically just the verb be, or to be, but we say I am, you are, he is, etc. So I am a teacher. Now I want you to notice a very important difference between these 2 sentences. Notice that in the first sentence, we are talking about a physical action because playing is something that we do physically. But in the second sentence, we are not talking about any physical action. We're just saying, I am a teacher. We call that a state. Okay, that means a situation. So verbs can show actions or they can show states or situations. Those are the 2 types of verbs. Okay, the next part of speech is the noun. A noun is the name given to a person, place, animal, thing, feeling, or idea. For example, here's a sentence with a lot of nouns. Rosie went to Malta on vacation with her family last year. Can you identify all the nouns in this sentence? Well, the first noun is Rosie. It's the name of a person. The second noun is Malta. Malta is the name of a place. It's actually a beautiful, small little island country in Europe. Okay, so Malta is a place. The next noun is vacation. Vacation is the name given to a type of trip that people take. And the noun after that is family. What's a family? A family is a group of people who are related. Mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, etc. And the last noun in the sentence is year. A year is just 365 days, or the time that it takes the earth to go around the sun. Now, of course, nouns can also be animals like dogs or cats, Or a noun could be a thing, like watch, pen, t-shirt, etc. Or it could be a feeling, such as love or anger. Those are all nouns. What's a pronoun though? Well, a pronoun is a word that replaces a noun. Replaces means it takes the place of a noun. But you might ask, why should a pronoun do that? Well, take a look at this sentence. Melvin is at the movies with Melvin's girlfriend. Melvin really enjoys spending time with Melvin's girlfriend. Now, of course, that sounds really stupid. And that is because, can you tell me why? Can you tell me what the problem is in that sentence? Well, the problem is that we keep repeating Melvin and Melvin's girlfriend. And that is very unnatural. We don't talk like that. And to avoid that kind of repetition, we can use pronouns. So can you tell me where you would use pronouns in those two sentences? Or we can say, Melvin is at the movies with his girlfriend. He really enjoys spending time with her. There are three pronouns there. His, he, and her. Did you get all of those? Okay, now I want you to notice that the pronoun he is in the subject position. He is the subject of the verb enjoy. Who enjoys? He enjoys. And the pronoun her is in the object position. Now, to replace a noun in the subject position, like Melvin, for example, we use what are called subject pronouns. These are I, you, we, they, he, she, and it. And to replace a noun in the object position, can you guess what we use? We use object pronouns. Those are me, you, us, them, him, her, and it. Now there are other pronouns in English, such as his, hers, this, that, etc. But we will talk about them in more detail when we come to the lesson on pronouns. For now, just remember that a pronoun replaces a noun to avoid repetition and to make our speech sound more natural. Okay, the next part of speech is the adjective. An adjective is a word that gives us information about a noun or a pronoun. Have a look at this sentence. They drive an amazing big red sports car. Here, the noun that we are interested in is car. So can you identify all the adjectives that give information about car? Well, if you said amazing, big, red, and sports, you are correct, because all of those are adjectives. And if you look at them closely, you will realize that these give us answers to questions like what color, what size, what type, etc. The adjective amazing gives us the answer to the question, what is your opinion of the car? Now, if you ask me, what's your opinion of the car? I would tell you, it's amazing. What size is the car? It's big. What's the color? It's red. And what type of car is it? It's a sports car. Okay, now that's all great. But I don't know if you noticed, there's actually one more adjective in this sentence. And that is the word an. Now the words a, an, and the are called articles in English. And articles are also adjectives because they give us information about the nouns that come after them. In this sentence, for example, we know that they drive one car. We know that because we said an amazing big red sports car. So remember that adjectives give us information about nouns and pronouns, and they answer questions like what type, what color, what size, etc. Okay, but what are adverbs? Now, when I learned grammar in school, I was taught that adjectives give information about nouns and adverbs give information about verbs. And in fact, a lot of teachers still teach it that way. But the thing is, that's only half correct, because an adverb can give information about a verb, but it can also give information about an adjective or even another adverb. So these are really talented verbs, you see. They can do a lot of things. And adverbs usually answer questions like when, why, how, in what way, etc. Let me show you a sentence so you can see all the different things that adverbs can do. Yesterday evening, we walked somewhat slowly in a very beautiful garden. In this sentence, the first adverb is yesterday evening. That shows us when the action happened. The action here is walk. That's the verb. There's another adverb, slowly, and that shows us how the action happened. How did we walk? We walked slowly. So both yesterday evening and slowly tell us about the verb walk. But notice that you can further ask, how slowly did we walk? Did we walk very slowly or a little slowly? The answer is somewhat slowly. Somewhat means something like a little. Now notice that somewhat is actually giving us information about slowly. How slowly? Somewhat slowly. So that's an adverb that gives information about another adverb. And there's yet another one, very. That adverb is giving us information about beautiful. Beautiful is an adjective. Okay? So you see all the different kinds of things that adverbs can do. All right, the next part of speech is the preposition. Prepositions are words like in, on, at, by, from, with, before, and after. And these words help us to show relationships in time, place, and position. For example, here's a common thing that we say to people that we know a lot. I'll see you at the office on Monday. There are two prepositions in this sentence. Can you say which those are? The prepositions are at and on. The first preposition, at, shows us the place. Where? At the office. And the second preposition, on, shows us the time. When? On Monday. So that's what prepositions do. They help us to show relationships in time, place, and position. Now, students sometimes confuse prepositions with conjunctions, but these are very different. Conjunctions are words like and, but, or, so, and because, and they help to connect ideas. For example, in the sentence, Clara and Jasmine are best friends. Can you say which the conjunction is? The conjunction is and it helps to connect Clara and Jasmine, both of which are nouns. But conjunctions can even connect sentences. For example, I didn't go to school today because I don't feel very well. Here, there are two sentences. We call them clauses. The second clause, I don't feel very well, is the reason. And the first clause, I didn't go to school today, is the result. The conjunction here is because, and it shows us this reason and result relationship. Notice that we can also say, I don't feel very well today, so I didn't go to school. In that case, the conjunction would be so. All right, the last part of speech that we will look at is the interjection. Interjections are words that have no real meaning, but they help us to show sudden emotion or exclamation. For example, the interjection, wow, shows excitement, surprise, or amazement. The interjection, shows frustration or anger. Like if I'm trying to open a jar of cookies or a jar of pickles. I can't open it. I might say, I just can't do it. That shows I'm angry or I'm frustrated. Some other common interjections are ouch, oops, hey, and hi. These last two words are used when we meet someone or when we want to call out to someone. For example, I can say, hi, how are you? Or, hey, John, over here. Look, I'm standing over here. So I want to call out to John. Okay. All right, so those are the 8 parts of speech. Let's do a quick recap of what we've learned today. We started with the verb. The verb is a word that shows an action or a state. State means situation. A noun is a person, place, animal, thing, feeling, or idea. A pronoun replaces a noun. And we use pronouns so that our speech is not repetitive and more natural. Adjectives are words that give us information about nouns or pronouns, and they answer questions like what kind, how many, what color, what size, etc. Adverbs give us information about verbs or adjectives or even other adverbs. Prepositions are words that help us to show relationships in time, place, or position. Conjunctions are words like and, but, because, etc. And they help us to connect ideas. Those can be nouns, or they can even be verbs, and even whole sentences. So you can connect any two ideas using conjunctions. And finally, interjections are words with no real meaning, and they help us to show exclamation or sudden emotion. Just remember that these are used less commonly in speech and more commonly, they're used more commonly in speech and not so much in writing. When we write them, we usually put an exclamation mark. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Hi, and welcome back to our series of lessons on the parts of speech. My name is Ganesh, and this lesson is all about verbs. In this lesson, I will teach you the different types of verbs that we have in English, and I'll also show you how to avoid some common mistakes that students make with verbs. We will start with state and action verbs, and then we'll look at main and helping verbs, and then we'll turn to regular and irregular verbs, and finally, we'll discuss transitive and intransitive verbs. Now, before we begin, as always, if you have any questions at all, you just have to let me know in the comments section, and I'll talk to you there. Okay, so first of all, what is a verb? Well, a verb is just a word that shows an action or a state. State means a situation. And actually, those are the 2 types of verbs. We call them state verbs and action verbs. Sometimes they're called stative and dynamic verbs, but the meaning is the same. Okay, what's the difference between these 2? The difference is that action verbs express physical activities or processes. For example, verbs like kick, shout, run, climb, stand, sit, grow. All of these show us physical activities or processes. But a state verb is a verb that expresses a situation. For example, verbs like be, have, think, like, and own are all state verbs. Now, when I say, I have a large family, here I'm using the state verb have. That means I'm not talking about doing any physical action. I'm just telling you about a situation. In this case, about my family. Or if I said, Julia likes chocolate ice cream. Is Julia doing any action in that sentence? No. That sentence just gives you some information about Julia. We're still using a verb, like, but it's a state verb. Okay, but why is this difference important? And is it important at all? It is, because there's an important rule in English that you should know. And that rule is state verbs cannot be used in ing forms. When you want to use a continuous form, you can only do that with action verbs. Let's look at a couple of examples. Now we can say, the children are playing in the park, or who's shouting. Both of these sentences are correct because the verbs play and shout are physical actions. So we can use ing forms. But we cannot say, I'm having a large family, or Julia is liking chocolate ice cream. Both of those sentences are wrong. There are common mistakes that some students make. Some students use ing forms with state verbs. Please don't make that mistake. And remember, no continuous forms with state verbs. Okay, let's now move on and talk about main and helping verbs. These are sometimes called auxiliary verbs as well. When a verb is used in a sentence, it can be used in two ways. It can either be used as the main verb of the sentence, or it can be a helping verb. That is, it can help the main verb. The most important helping verbs are be, do, and have. Let's look at some examples with these. Luciano is working now. In this sentence, there are two verbs. Can you tell me which are the two verbs? Is and working are the two verbs. Which is the main verb? The main verb is working because that shows the action that is happening. So what about is? What is it doing? Is a helping verb that shows the tense of the sentence. We know that Luciano is working now because we said is. If I said Luciano was working, you know I'm talking about the past. So that helping verb is showing the tense. And that's one of the things that helping verbs can do. They can also help us to form negative sentences. For example, Luciano isn't working now. Or questions, is Luciano working now? In all three of these sentences, the helping verb is be or to be. We're saying is, but that's just a form of the verb to be. We say I am, you are, he is, she is, etc. The verbs do and have can also be helping verbs. For example, I don't play golf every weekend. Maybe I'm talking to my friends and my friends say, hey, you play golf every weekend, right? And I say, no, I don't play golf every weekend. I play tennis, for example. So don't is do not. That's the negative form of the verb do, and it helps me to make a negative. Or my friends could ask, do you play golf every weekend? That's a question. Let's look at an example with the verb have. We have visited the UK 4 times. Here, we know that the main verb is visited, but can you tell me what is the purpose of using have in this sentence? Now, if I told you, we visited the UK last year. In that sentence, I'm talking about one single experience. That is, my visit last year. But when I say, we have visited the UK 4 times, then I'm not talking about any single experience, but I'm talking about life experience. That is, in our lives, we have visited the UK 4 times. That's what the verb have helps us to do in this sentence. Okay, so that's how be, do, and have are used as helping verbs. But take a look at this next sentence. We have a car. Now, both of these sentences use the verb have. But do you notice a difference between them? The difference is that the first sentence uses have as a helping verb, but the second sentence uses have as the main verb. Now you might be thinking, how is that possible? Because have is a helping verb, right? True, but in some cases, be, do, and have can be used as main verbs. Now in this sentence, have is used to mean own. We own a car, is what I'm saying. So in that way, in some cases, these can be used as main verbs, but most of the time, they're used as helping verbs. Another type of helping verb is modals. Modals are these words: can, could, may, might, will, would, shall, should, and must. I'm sure you know these verbs, and I'm sure you use these a lot too. Modals help us to express mood in a sentence. What is mood? In grammar, mood means the attitude of the speaker. That is the feeling I want to convey to you. For example, if I said, the Patriots might win the Super Bowl this year. If you don't know what that means, the Super Bowl is an American football tournament in the US, and the New England Patriots are a team. So I am making a prediction about the future, and I'm using the modal verb might to do that. Try to read that sentence without might. The Patriots win the Super Bowl this year. It sounds like I'm 100% sure, but that's not what I want to say. I want to say that I'm maybe 70% sure. Okay, so I'm using might. So might adds that mood to the sentence, that I'm talking about possibility in the future. Modals can also express ability, like my sister can play the guitar. In that sentence, play is the main verb and can shows ability. Or if I said, you mustn't smoke here, what's the mood I'm trying to convey? I'm using the modal verb must in the negative, must not, to show that you don't have permission. You mustn't smoke here. So in that way, modals help us to express mood in a sentence. All right, so that's our discussion of main and helping verbs. Let's now move on and talk about regular and irregular verbs. To understand these, you need to know a little bit of background information. And that is that in English, only verbs can have tenses. Of course, you know about past tense, present tense, and future tense. But to make tenses, we change the forms of verbs. Do you know how many forms of verbs there are in English? There are 5 forms. We call these the infinitive or the base form, the present tense form, the past tense form, the past participle form. This form is used in some tenses, and it's also used in conditionals and in the passive voice, so it's an important form. And then we have the ing or the continuous form. Let's take the example of a regular verb, to cook. Its present tense forms are cook and cooks. That's because we say I, you, we, they cook, but he, she, or it cooks. The past tense form is cooked, the past participle form is also cooked, and the ing form is cooking. We say that this is a regular verb because both the past tense form and the past participle forms are just ed endings, cooked. But you cannot do that with an irregular verb, like the verb to go. The present tense forms are go and goes, but the past tense form is not goed, it's went. The past participle form is gone. Or take the verb to be. It has 3 present tense forms, am, is, and are. I am, you are, he is, she is. And 2 past tense forms, was and were, and the past participle form is been. And here's one last example, the verb to read. Its past tense and past participle forms are spelled R-E-A-D, but pronounced read, like the color red. So you might be thinking, well, how can I guess the past and past participle forms of irregular verbs? Well, the answer is you cannot. And that's what it means when we say that a verb is irregular. There's no rule for making the 2 past and past participle forms. You just have to learn them through experience. So it's a good idea for you to go to your dictionary or to your course book and try to learn as many irregular verbs as you can, because that will help you to use English without making mistakes. All right, let's now move on to our final type of verb, that is transitive and intransitive verbs. Have you heard of these before? Well, they're actually really easy, but they're also important because a lot of students make mistakes in this area. A transitive verb is just a verb that takes an object. What do I mean by object? Do you know? In grammar, the object of a verb is a noun, that is a person, place, animal, or thing that receives the action of the verb. And a transitive verb always takes an object. Okay, I know you might be feeling really confused now. What does all this mean? So I'll show you a couple of examples to help you understand this concept. Now, if I said, Duncan kicked, does that sound a little wrong? Because you might ask me, Duncan kicked what? And I would have to say something like, oh, sorry, Duncan kicked the ball, for example. The ball is the object of the verb kick because the ball receives the kick. And the verb kick is a transitive verb. It always needs an object. Some other common transitive verbs are hit, give, carry, climb, make, kiss, and take. With all of these, if you ask the questions who or what, you will get an answer. Duncan kicked what? The ball. I made a cake. I made what? A cake. She kissed Pablo. She kissed who? Pablo. So that's how you know that these are all transitive verbs. What about intransitive verbs then? Can you tell me what it means to be an intransitive verb? Well, that's a verb that does not take an object. For example, verbs like live, die, laugh, cry, run, sleep, sit, stand. These are all intransitive verbs. They don't take objects. For example, the old man laughed loudly. Notice that in this sentence, there is no object. We're saying the old man laughed, but then loudly is not a person or thing receiving the action. That's just an adverb that gives us information about laugh. So if you ask the questions, the old man laughed who? Or the old man laughed what? You will get no answer. That's how you know that that verb is intransitive. Okay, I told you that students make mistakes with these. What kinds of mistakes do they make? Well, the most common mistake is that students often leave out the object with a transitive verb. For example, students say, the thief climbed and then escaped. Can you identify the error in that sentence? Well, the mistake is that the verb climb is a transitive verb and you need to say climbed what? You need to say an object. Now in your mind, you might have a picture of a thief climbing over a wall and then running away. But you need to say that. You need to say the thief climbed over the wall and then escaped. So don't make that mistake of leaving out the object after a transitive verb. Okay, let's now quickly recap what we've learned today. We started with state and action verbs. Remember that state verbs show situations and you don't use ing forms with state verbs. Then we spoke about main and helping verbs. Be, do, and have are the most important helping or auxiliary verbs, but sometimes they can be used as main verbs in a sentence. Modals are another type of helping verb, and they help us to show mood. That's things like possibility, ability, and permission. Then we turn to regular and irregular verbs. The past and past participle forms of irregular verbs cannot be guessed, so you have to learn them through experience. And finally, we spoke about transitive verbs, which take an object, and intransitive verbs, which do not take an object. Do you remember the common mistake that I shared with you? The common mistake is leaving out objects with transitive verbs. Don't make that mistake. All right, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Hi there, and welcome back to our series of lessons on the parts of speech. My name is Ganesh, and this lesson is all about nouns. In this lesson, we will learn about the different kinds of nouns there are in English, and we will also look at some rules to keep in mind when using them. We will first talk about concrete and abstract nouns, and then we'll look at common and proper nouns, which are a very important area. Then we'll discuss the very interesting collective nouns. And finally, we'll turn to the most important topic relating to nouns, and that is countable and uncountable nouns. Before we start, just remember, for any questions, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll talk to you there. Okay, so first of all, what is a noun? I'm sure you know the answer to this. A noun is just the name of a person, place, animal, thing, feeling, or idea. For example, in this sentence, Graham likes to go to the zoo and see the animals. Here, there are 3 nouns. Can you identify all of them? The nouns are Graham, a person, zoo, a place, and animals. Nouns can also be things like watch, t-shirt, etc. And all of these, people, places, animals, and things, are physical. That means we can see them and we can touch them. So they are called concrete nouns. That means they have a real physical existence. So what are abstract nouns then? Abstract nouns are nouns that don't have a physical existence. That means we cannot touch them or see them, and these are ideas and feelings. Now in this sentence, honesty is the best policy. It's a very popular proverb in English. Have you heard of that? In that sentence, honesty and policy are both nouns, but they are abstract nouns. And in this next example, love is a powerful emotion. Love is the name of a feeling, like anger, happiness, or sorrow, and love is a noun. Emotion is also a noun. Okay, let's now talk about common and proper nouns. Do you know what common and proper nouns are? A common noun is a general noun, and a proper noun is the name given to a specific individual. For example, in this chart, all the nouns on the left are common nouns, and all the nouns on the right are proper nouns. For example, man is a common noun because it can mean any man. But Ganesh is the name of one man, one individual, which in this case is me, of course. So Ganesh is a proper noun. Woman, in the same way, is a common noun. It could be any woman. But Allison is the name of an individual, so a proper noun. In the next two, city and country are common nouns, but Hamburg and China are the names of one city and one country, so proper nouns. Okay, now let me ask you a question at this point. Do you notice something about the proper nouns? You should be noticing that they're all written with a capital first letter. And that is actually a rule in English. Proper nouns are always written with a capital first letter. In university, for example, when we talk about universities in general, we use it as a common noun. So the whole word is written in lowercase. That means in small letters. But when we're talking about a specific university, like the University of Chicago, notice that both the U in university and the C in Chicago are capitals. That's because it's a proper noun that refers to one specific university. Okay, there are more examples on the screen, but I want you to focus on the last two, day and month. With the days of the week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we always write them with the first letter capitalized because they are proper nouns. And it's the same thing for months as well. From January to December, all months are written with a capital first letter. So please don't forget this rule. Proper nouns are always capitalized or always written with the first letter capitalized. Okay, let's now turn to the really interesting collective nouns. Collective means something like collection. And a collective noun is the name given to a group of people, animals, places, or things. I say that these are interesting because there are a lot of collective nouns in English and they can be very interesting to learn. Let's look at some common examples. A group of players is called a team. A team is a collective noun and it means a group of players, or it could even mean a group of workers in a company. Actually, there's another word for a group of workers or employees. Can you guess that word? That word is staff. In the same way, on the screen I have some more examples, but I want you to guess the collective nouns before I show them to you. What do we call a group of students? A group of students is a class. What about a group of criminals? A gang. A group of soldiers is an army. What about a group of onlookers? Onlookers means, let's say there's been an accident on the road, like there's been a car crash. Onlookers are the people that stand around the scene and they want to see what's happening. So what do you call a group of onlookers? We call them a crowd. Did you get that one? There are also collective nouns for animals. For example, a group of wolves is called a pack. And wolves are very dangerous when they're in a pack. A group of bees is called a swarm. If you ever see a swarm of bees coming towards you, please run, because they can sting really hard and it hurts very, very bad, okay? All right. There are also collective nouns for things. Like if I have 5 or 6 keys in my hand, do you know what we call that? We call it a bunch of keys. What about 2 shoes? A pair. And when there are stairs that you have to take from one floor of a building to the next floor, do you know what we call that? It's called a flight of stairs. Okay, so like I said, these can be really interesting, but there's one problem. Collective nouns can be difficult because there's so many of them. So what can you do? Well, there are 2 things that you can do. First, you can learn the most common collective nouns. The examples that I just showed you are some very common collective nouns. So if you learn the most common ones, then you can use them fluently in conversation. But sometimes you might be in a situation where you want to use a collective noun, but you don't know it or you cannot remember it. Like let's say you want to say a gang of criminals, but you cannot remember that word, gang. So what can you do? You can just use a word like group, a group of criminals, and your meaning will be clear. Or you can say a bunch of things. The word bunch is a common collective noun, like a bunch of bananas, for example. So these kinds of expressions, common collective nouns, and even quantity expressions like a lot of, some, etc., if you use them, your meaning will be clear. But one reason to learn collective nouns is that if you use the correct collective noun in a situation, it will make your speech sound stylish. So try to learn as many as you can. Okay? All right, let's now move on and talk about the most important area relating to nouns, and that is countable and uncountable nouns. That's why I've underlined in red, because they're so important. Do you know the meaning of countable noun? A countable noun is a noun that can be counted, and an uncountable noun cannot be counted. Some common countable nouns are book, pen, man, spoon, building, elephant, etc. With all of these, we can use numbers or plurals to talk about them. We can say 2 books, 5 pens, 3 buildings, etc. If there's only one, we can use a or an. I have a book. There's an elephant standing over there, etc. But uncountable nouns are nouns like water, coffee, air, salt, sugar, love, advice, and so on. And just by seeing them, you should be able to say there's no way to count them, because water and coffee are liquids. Air is a gas. Salt and sugar are so small that if you try to count the individual particles, that would be an extremely difficult task. And love and advice are abstract nouns because they're feelings and ideas. So most abstract nouns are uncountable. So with uncountable nouns, we cannot use plurals and we cannot use a and an. That is very important. But we can use units to talk about quantity. For example, we can say a glass of water or two glasses of water, 6 tablespoons of sugar, or a cup of coffee, 5 cups of coffee, and so on. Or we can use units of volume or weight, like pounds, kilograms, ounces, and liters. This is how we talk about the quantity of uncountable nouns. To ask questions, we use the expression how many with countable nouns, like how many computers do you have in your office? And with uncountable nouns, we use how much. How much water is there in the bottle? Or how much sugar is there in the jar? Now, with any of these questions, if you know the exact answer, you can give it. You can say, there are 20 computers in my office, or there's half a liter of water, okay, or 4 pounds of sugar in the jar. But what about if you don't know the exact number or quantity? In that case, you can use quantity expressions. With countable nouns, we use a few to mean a small number. I can say, oh, there are only a few computers in my office. I don't know the exact number, but it's a small number. Or I can say, there's only a little water in the jar. So with uncountable nouns, we use a little. This is very important. And what about to talk about a big number or a big quantity? Can you tell me what we use? With countable nouns, we use many or a lot of. There are many computers in my office, or there are a lot of computers in my office. With uncountable nouns, we can use much, but that's less common. It's more common, once again, to use a lot of. Like, there is a lot of coffee in the cup. So notice that a lot can be used both with countable and uncountable nouns. In the same way, the word some can also be used with both types. For example, some computers in my office don't work. That's some number, but I don't want to say the number, or I don't know the number. In the same way, we can say, there's some tea left in the glass. Some tea is some quantity, but I don't know the quantity. So with both countable and uncountable nouns, we can use a lot of and some. Okay, now I want to tell you about an area where a lot of students make mistakes, so pay close attention. And this is when we want to make comparisons. We're going to take a couple of examples. Let's say that in my neighborhood, that is in the place where I live, there are 5 buildings. In your neighborhood, there are 10 buildings. So we can say that there are more buildings in your neighborhood. Okay? Just keep that in mind. And let's take another example, this time uncountable nouns. I drink 2 cups of coffee a day, but you drink 4 cups of coffee a day. So you drink more coffee. Okay, so far, so good. But what about the opposite? We can say that I drink less coffee. All right, but back to our first example, we said there are more buildings in your neighborhood. That means in my neighborhood, there are fewer buildings. This is where a lot of people go wrong. People say there are less buildings in my neighborhood. That is grammatically incorrect because with countable nouns, you cannot use less, you have to use fewer to compare. Okay, so remember these rules and remember not to make the common mistakes that we discussed here. All right, let's do a quick recap of what we've learned today. We started with concrete and abstract nouns. Remember that concrete nouns have a physical existence and abstract nouns are ideas and feelings which we cannot touch or see. Then we spoke about common and proper nouns. What is the important rule with proper nouns? You always capitalize the first letter. Then we turned to collective nouns. Remember to learn as many collective nouns as you can because that will help you to speak with more style. And finally, we looked at countable and uncountable nouns. We discussed a number of rules. Remember that the most common mistake is using less with countable nouns. It's wrong. Less is used with uncountable nouns. Fewer is used with countable nouns. Alright, so that brings us to the end of this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. Hi, and welcome back to our series of lessons on the parts of speech. My name is Ganesh, and this lesson is all about pronouns. Now, pronouns are a huge topic. There are many different types of pronouns, and there are a lot of grammar points relating to pronouns. So in this lesson, we're going to focus on the most important types of pronouns and on how to avoid common mistakes that people make with them. We will start by talking about personal pronouns, then we'll move on to reflexive pronouns, and then we'll look at indefinite pronouns, and finally we'll turn to interrogative pronouns. Now, if these names sound scary, don't worry. By the end of this lesson, you will understand all of them and you'll know how to use them correctly. Before we begin, just remember, if you have any questions at all, just let me know in the comments section below and I'll talk to you there. Okay, so first of all, what is a pronoun? A pronoun is a word that replaces a noun in a sentence. Replaces means it takes the place of a noun. For example, consider these sentences. Corey works with Paige. Corey likes working with Paige. Corey and Paige do many projects together. Of course, that sounds very repetitive because we keep saying Corey and Paige. So can you tell me how you would improve the sentence? Well, you can say, he likes working with her. They do many projects together. That sounds much more natural because we're using the pronouns he, her, and they in the place of nouns. And that type of pronouns that talk about people are called personal pronouns because they refer to persons, even though the pronoun it is considered a personal pronoun. Now, personal pronouns come in three types: subject, object, and possessive pronouns. A subject pronoun is used in the place of a subject in a sentence. For example, in this sentence, I saw Lily yesterday. Here, which is the pronoun? The pronoun is I, and it's a subject pronoun because I do the action. And you can replace that with any other subject pronoun. You can say, we saw Lily yesterday, or he saw Lily yesterday, etc. An object pronoun is used in the object position in a sentence. For example, Lily saw them yesterday. Here, them is an object pronoun, and you could use any other object pronoun in that place. So what do possessive pronouns do? Possessive pronouns show possession. That means they show that you have something. For example, if I said, this is our house, the pronoun our shows that this house belongs to me and my family, for example. I could also say, this house is ours. That means the same thing. Now, all of these, the whole group of personal pronouns, are actually very simple, and I'm sure you use them correctly most of the time. But there are two areas where people commonly make mistakes with them. The first is in using the pronouns I and me. Of course, those are the simplest, but those are also where a very common error occurs. And that is when combining I or me with another noun or a pronoun. For example, we know that Corey and Paige work together. But let's say that Corey wants to say this sentence. I have four options on the screen, and I would like you to tell me which is the correct way to say it. I and Paige work together. Paige and I work together. Me and Paige work together, or Paige and me work together. Which is correct? Well, here we need a subject pronoun, so we cannot use me. Between the first two options, the first option is grammatically correct, but the best way to say this is Paige and I work together. That is because when you put the other person first, it's more respectful, and in English, it's considered more polite. So Paige and I work together is the best way. Now, instead of Paige, you could use any noun. It could even be a plural noun, like the children and I are going to the park, or my friends and I are at the movies, for example. It could even be another pronoun, like you and I. Here's another example. The boss gave the project to Corey and Paige. Now let's say that Paige wants to say it this time. On the screen again, there are the four options. Only one of them is correct, and I want you to tell me which is right. Pause the video if you want, think about it, and then play the video again and check. Okay, here we want to use an object pronoun because the noun and pronoun are in the object position, so we need to use me. And once again, the right way to say it is the boss gave the project to Corey and me. We want to put the other person first. The common error in both of these types of sentences is to use one of the other forms. It's very common for students to make that error, so please avoid doing that. Okay, that's one type of mistake. Another type of mistake that students commonly make with personal pronouns is when writing the pronouns ours, yours, and theirs. Remember, I said this house is ours. I could also say this house is yours or this house is theirs. In all of these pronouns, there is no apostrophe before the S. A very common mistake is to put an apostrophe there, and that makes your sentence look ungrammatical and unprofessional if you're writing in a formal situation. So make sure to avoid that error. All right, so those are the two errors with personal pronouns. Let's now move on and talk about reflexive pronouns. Reflexive pronouns are pronouns like myself, yourself, himself, etc. And these are called reflexive because they reflect back to the subject of the sentence. For example, this morning, I stood in front of a mirror. What did I see in the mirror? I saw myself. In that sentence, notice that the subject and the object are both the same, I or me. And to show that relationship, we use the ending self. I saw myself. Let me give you another example. I have a friend who likes to think very deeply about things. And when he thinks, he likes to get up and walk around the room and talk. Except he doesn't talk to other people. He talks to himself. Again, the subject and the object are the same person. So where do people make mistakes with these? Well, take a look at these four sentences that you have on the screen. Some of these sentences are wrong, and I want you to tell me which sentences are wrong. Stop the video if you want, read the sentences, think about which are wrong, and then play the video again and check. Okay, actually, I tricked you a little bit with that one. All of these sentences are actually wrong. That's because the words ourself, themselves, theirselves, or his self are not real words. They don't exist in English. But many people still use those forms. So the correct way to say these sentences would be to say, we're going to paint the house by ourselves. Students who cheat on exams cheat themselves. My sisters themselves don't recognize me now after all these years. And Jordan bought himself a present for his birthday. Now, the pronouns that you see on the screen are the only reflexive pronouns in English. There are no other reflexive pronouns. So it's a good idea for you to memorize these so that you don't use any wrong forms. So that's one mistake that's very common with reflexive pronouns. The second kind of mistake has to do with myself. Not me, but the pronoun myself. Now take a look at these sentences. Joey and myself are going to give a presentation at the meeting. For more information, please feel free to write to myself anytime. Now, you might even hear a native speaker say these types of sentences, but both of these are actually wrong. Can you say why they're wrong? They're wrong because if you look at them carefully, the subject and the object in these sentences are not the same. When I said, I saw myself in the mirror, the subject and the object were the same. But in these two sentences, that's not the case. So here, you have to remove myself and replace it with the correct subject or object pronoun. So in the first sentence, you have to say, Joey and I are going to give a presentation at the meeting. And what about in the second sentence? For more information, please feel free to write to me at any time. It's that simple. So remember to only use myself or any reflexive form when the subject and the object are the same. Okay, so let's now move on and talk about indefinite pronouns. What do you understand by the word indefinite? It means something like not definite or not sure. And these are words like everybody, someone, something, anything, either, and neither. And these are indefinite because they don't refer to a particular person or a particular thing. Now, the important point here is that all the indefinite pronouns that you see on the screen are singular pronouns. That means with all of them, you have to use singular verbs in the present tense. Okay, on the screen, again, there are some sentences. And in each sentence, I would like you to choose the correct form. Take a moment and stop the video now. Think about your answers and then play the video and check. All right, let's look at the answers. In number 1, there's a party at our place on Saturday night and everybody is welcome. This is because the pronoun everybody is singular. And you might be asking here, wait, how is that possible? Because everybody means all the people. True, but everybody is kind of like saying every single body or every single person. So because we're referring to every single person, the pronoun is singular and you have to use a singular verb. In the same way, in number 2, no one knows the answer to that question. We're talking about no one. In number 3, you look worried. Is something wrong? And number 4 is a little tricky. What it means is that a match happened, let's say a soccer match. 2 teams played, Team A and Team B. Team A did not score a goal, and Team B also did not score a goal. That's what neither means. It means not either, the opposite of either. Now, this sentence is tricky because you have the word teams before the verb. But remember that the verb in a sentence should agree with the subject of the sentence. And the subject here is not teams, it's neither, which means not either. And because neither is singular, we have to say was. Neither of the 2 teams was able to score a goal. Did you get these right? Okay, this sentence is similar to another sentence that I want to show you. One of my friends, a doctor. How would you fill in that gap? Well, you have to say, one of my friends is a doctor. That's because we're talking about one friend. All of my friends are not doctors. The subject of the sentence is one, so is. Okay, let's now move on and talk about our final type of pronoun, and that is interrogative pronouns. Now, even though this name might sound a little fancy, interrogative pronouns are just the question words who, whom, whose, what, and which. Now, in this lesson, we're going to focus on these two, the difference between what and which, and the difference between who and whom. So first of all, do you know the difference between what and which? Well, it's really easy. What is a general question and which is a specific question? For example, let's say that we go to a restaurant, you and me. Oh, sorry, you and I. Remember that? You and I go to a restaurant. We go to the restaurant and we sit down, and the waiter brings the menu. So you ask me, what do you want to eat? Now you're saying, what do you want to eat? Because the menu has many items and we can choose any item. There are lots of options. But then before I can give my answer, the waiter says, I'm really sorry, it's late and we only have sandwiches and noodles now. So now you turn to me and you know there's only two options. So you say, which do you want to eat? You're saying which because the number of options is limited. We only can eat either sandwiches or noodles. So think of which as kind of like pointing, this or that. In that way, with any situation where there are a small number of options, we use which. For example, with parts of the body, we use which. If someone said to you, there's something in my eye, you would ask, which eye? Not what eye, because there's only two eyes. It's the same with ears, fingers, hands, arms, feet, legs, etc. If I told you, I broke my finger, you would ask me, which finger? Okay? Or let's say you're watching a game with your friends, your favorite sport. You might ask your friends, which team do you think will win? You would ask the same thing if you want to ask about the tournament. Okay? Maybe there are 16 teams or 32 teams, but that's still a limited number. So you would ask, which team do you think will win the cup? So that's the difference between what and which. Let's now turn to who and whom. Now, before I tell you anything, let me just say this. In modern English, it's perfectly okay to use who in all situations. So if you're ever confused about whether to use who or whom in a question, just remember you can use who in any situation and your meaning will be clear. But if you are writing something formal or if you want to use correct grammar, then of course it's important to know the difference. And the difference is this. Who is a subject pronoun and whom is an object pronoun. It's like I and me. Let's take a situation. Helen visited her friend Mabel in the hospital last week. There are two questions on the screen, but I want you to supply the question word in each case. What about the first one? Well, in the first, we know that someone visited Mabel, but we don't know who that person was. That is, we're asking about the subject. For that reason, we use who. Who visited Mabel last week? Or who visited Mabel in the hospital last week? In the next sentence, it's the opposite. We know that Helen visited somebody, and this time we want to ask about that person. That person is in the object position. So, whom did Helen visit in the hospital last week? Did you get both of those right? Now, if you're interested to learn more about this difference, I have a whole lesson dedicated to this topic. You will find the link in the description. You can go and watch it if you like. All right. Now, before we finish, let's do a quick recap of what we've learned today. We started with personal pronouns. We discussed two types of common mistakes. The first is when combining the pronouns I or me with a noun or another pronoun. Remember to put the other person first, like Corey and I, Paige and I, or Corey and me, Paige and me, the children and I, and so on. The second type of mistake is using apostrophes with ours, yours, and theirs. Remember, no apostrophes when you write any of these forms. Then we spoke about reflexive pronouns. Do you remember the mistakes that I shared with you? The first type of mistake is to use forms of reflexive pronouns that don't exist. The ones that you see on the screen are the only reflexive pronouns, and it's a good idea for you to memorize these forms so that you don't use any wrong ones. Another common mistake is to overuse myself, thinking that it's more formal. Remember, you can only use myself if I or me is the object of the, is the subject and the object of the sentence. Then we spoke about indefinite pronouns. All the pronouns that you see on the screen are singular, so you have to use singular verbs in the present tense. And finally, we turn to interrogative pronouns. We spoke about the difference between what and which. What is general or broad, but which is more specific. It's kind of like pointing. And then we looked at who and whom. Who is a subject pronoun if you want to ask about the subject of a sentence, and whom is an object pronoun. All right, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and welcome back to our Parts of Speech series. My name is Ganesh, and in this lesson, we're going to learn all about adjectives. In this lesson, I will tell you what is an adjective and what are the two main types of adjectives. And then we will focus on using adjectives correctly and how to avoid common mistakes that students make with them. We will look at three areas: ed and ing adjectives, comparatives and superlatives, and the order of adjectives. That is, when you have more than one adjective in a sentence, which should you put first, second, etc. So we'll talk about avoiding errors in these three areas. Before we start, just remember, if you have any questions at all, you can ask me in the comment section below and I will talk to you there. Okay, so first of all, what is an adjective? Well, that's easy. An adjective is a word that gives information about a noun or pronoun. In grammar, we say that an adjective modifies a noun or pronoun. Modify here means to change the noun or pronoun by giving more information about it. For example, take a look at this sentence. There are 3 small black wooden chairs in this room. Focus on the noun chairs, and can you tell me which adjectives modify, that is, give more information about chairs? The adjectives are 3, small, black, and wooden. These adjectives answer questions like how many, what size, what color, what material, etc. Now, in this example, the adjectives occur before the noun, but they can also appear after the noun or pronoun, like in this example. The food was hot and delicious. Here the adjectives hot and delicious appear after the noun food, and notice that we use the linking verb be, past tense was, to connect the noun and the adjectives. Okay, now that you know what an adjective is, let's talk about the two types of adjectives in English. There are two main types of adjectives in English. These are called determiners and descriptive adjectives. Or as I like to say, less interesting and more interesting adjectives. I say that descriptive adjectives are more interesting because these are what we commonly think of as adjectives. Words like beautiful, big, small, tall, short, blue, red, etc. So what are determiners then? Well, determiners are a small group of grammar words that act as adjectives. Words like my, our, your, his, her, etc. are determiners. When I say, that's my car, for example, the word my shows that I'm not talking about any car. I'm talking about one particular car, my car. So the word my acts as an adjective by giving information about the noun car. In the same way, the words this, that, these, and those also act as adjectives. Also, the question words what, which, and whose can be determiners. If I asked, which team do you think will win the next match? The word which asks for information about team. Team is a noun, so which is an adjective. Quantity words like numbers And quantity expressions such as a few, some, and many are determiners as well. And finally, articles, that is the words a, an, and the, are also considered adjectives because if I said a window is broken, it could be any window. But if I said the window is broken, we both know which window I'm talking about. So articles give us information about nouns, and so they're also adjectives. Now all determiners are adjectives, but we will discuss these in other lessons because each one of them is a big topic. In this lesson, we're going to focus on the really interesting adjectives, that is, descriptive adjectives, and we will look at how to avoid common errors with them. Now in English, there are lots and lots of descriptive adjectives. Some of them are formed from nouns, verbs, and even other adjectives. These are usually straightforward, meaning that they're easy to use. But one area where students commonly make mistakes is adjectives formed from verbs using the endings ed and ing. Have a look at this chart. On the left, you see 3 ing adjectives, and on the right, 3 ed adjectives. The adjectives boring and bored are formed from the verb bore, confusing and confused from the verb confuse, and exciting and excited formed from the verb excite. Now you see 3 sentences on the screen. In each sentence, I want you to put an ing adjective in one blank and the ed adjective in the other blank. There's a clue at the end of each sentence to help you. Stop the video now if you'd like. Think about your answers, then play the video and check. Okay, now before I give you the answers, let's first understand the difference between ed and ing adjectives. The difference is this. Ing adjectives always show cause or reason, and ed adjectives show effect or result. So in the first sentence, my wife and I went to see a movie. The movie was boring, so we were bored. The movie was the reason or cause, and our feeling, bored, was the result or the effect. In the same way in number 2, the students felt really confused because the professor's lecture was so confusing. And in number 3, the story was exciting and the children were excited to hear it. Did you get all of these right? Okay, so just remember that ing adjectives will always express cause and ed adjectives will express effect. Let's now turn to the second area where mistakes are very common, and that is comparatives and superlatives. What are comparatives and superlatives? Well, these are words that help you to compare nouns, people, places, animals, things, etc. And we do that using adjectives. Comparatives are found in this form, more or less plus an adjective plus than, or as plus adjective plus as. And this means that the 2 nouns we are comparing are equal. Superlatives appear as most or least plus adjective. To understand these, we're going to take the example of some popular cars: the Honda Civic, the Ford Mustang, and the Chevrolet Corvette. Let's say that the Civic is $20,000, the Mustang is $45,000, and the Corvette is $60,000. Now let's compare these cars using the adjective expensive. On the screen, there are a few sentences, and once again, I would like you to fill in the gaps with the correct comparative or superlative form. Pause the video if you want, try the exercise, and then play the video and check. All right, let's look at the answers. The Corvette is more expensive than the Mustang. So that means the Mustang is less expensive than the Corvette. But the Mustang is more expensive than the Honda Civic. So the Civic is less expensive than the Mustang. The Corvette is the most expensive of the 3 cars, and the Civic is the least expensive of the 3 cars. Remember, I told you we could also use the form as plus adjective plus as to mean that two nouns are equal in some way. Well, let's say that the Ferrari is also $60,000. That means the price of the Ferrari and the Corvette are the same. So we can say the Ferrari is as expensive as the Corvette. So what kinds of mistakes do students make with comparatives and superlatives? Well, mistakes commonly occur in the ER, EST, and irregular forms of adjectives. With some adjectives, instead of saying more and most, we add the endings ER and EST. For example, we don't say more cheap, we say cheaper. And we say cheapest, not most cheap. In the same way, we have big, bigger, biggest, small, smaller, smallest, and so on. Some adjectives are called irregular because you cannot guess their comparative and superlative forms. For example, to compare using the adjective good, we don't say gooder and goodest. We say better and best. Similarly, do you know the comparative and superlative forms of bad, bad, worse, and worst? So with these in mind, here are a few example sentences. All of them have mistakes in them. I would like you to stop the video now, think about how you would correct these sentences, and then play the video and check. Okay, in the first sentence, the error is that an ER form, taller, is used along with more. Remember that the word taller means more tall. So if you say more taller, that's like saying more tall, which doesn't make sense. So the correct way to say this is to just say Maya is taller than Sarah. Remember that whenever you use an ER form, don't put more before it. In the same way, when you have an EST form, don't put most in front of it. So in number 2, we have an EST form, richest, but we also have most. We'll need to remove that. So Bill Gates is the richest man in the world. In number 3, the problem is slightly different because we have less. We cannot say less easier because, again, easier means more easy. So it's like saying less more easy, which makes no sense. A better way to say this would be learning Korean is more difficult than learning Spanish. Instead, you could also say harder, or even learning Korean isn't as easy as learning Spanish. And finally, what about number 4? Here, the problem is the word beautifulest. Actually, there's no such word. We cannot say beautifuler and beautifulest. The adjective beautiful does not have those forms. Instead, we have to say more beautiful and most beautiful. So this is the most beautiful garden I have ever seen. All right, so remember not to make any of these mistakes. Let's now move on and look at the third and final area where students commonly make mistakes with adjectives, and that is the order of adjectives. What do I mean by order of adjectives? Well, in English, when you have more than one adjective describing a noun, there's usually a fixed order in which to put those adjectives. And the mistake that students often make is that they sometimes put adjectives in the wrong order. Let's take an example. In my home, I have a tablecloth. You know, a cloth that you put on a table before you put any food on the table. This tablecloth is from France. It's blue in color. It's not very big, it's small. And it's also quite old. It's made from cotton. Oh, it's round in shape. And it's beautiful. Now your job is to put all of these adjectives in the correct order before the noun tablecloth. Pause the video if you want. Think about the order and then play the video again and check. All right, here's how you order adjectives in English. If we have a determiner, we put it first. Remember that determiners are grammar words that act as adjectives. In this sentence, the determiner is A, so it's at the beginning of the sentence. We then say our opinion. In this case, that's the word beautiful. Then comes size, small. Then shape, round. After that, we put age, in this case, old. Then comes color, blue, and then origin. My tablecloth is from France, so French. We can then say what material it's made of, cotton. And finally, we can include its purpose if we want. Now, if we were talking about a cleaning liquid, for example, the word cleaning would be its purpose. In the case of the tablecloth, we don't have a purpose, so we don't need to include it. So the final order of adjectives here is, in my home, I have a beautiful, small, round, old, blue, French, cotton tablecloth. Okay, let me say here that it's not very common to have so many adjectives in one sentence, and it's not good because for your listener, it's too much information. But this example was just to show you how we order adjectives in English. So now on the screen, there are a couple more examples. Your job is to put the adjectives in the correct order in each sentence. Stop the video, think about your answer, then play the video again and check. Okay, in the first sentence, we should say, yesterday I met a well-dressed young Japanese man. The word well-dressed is an opinion, so it comes first. Age comes next, young, and finally, origin, Japanese. In number 2, Jared owns 2 expensive yellow German sports cars. Notice here that sports is the purpose, so it comes last. Did you get both of those right? If you did, fantastic. But if you didn't, don't worry, because this topic is often quite difficult at the beginning, but you will get better at it with time and practice. Okay, before we finish this lesson, let's do a quick recap of what we've learned here today. We first learned about the 2 main types of adjectives. Determiners, which are a group of grammar words that act as adjectives, and descriptive adjectives, what we can think of as the real adjectives. Then we looked at ed and ing adjectives. Remember that ing adjectives show cause or reason, and ed adjectives show effect or result. Then we turned to comparatives and superlatives. Do you remember the common errors that we discussed? The errors are using er forms with more and est forms with most. Remember not to do that. And finally, we learned the order of adjectives: determiner, opinion, size, shape, age, color, origin, material, and purpose. The error is to mix up this order, so it's a good idea for you to memorize it. All right, I hope you enjoyed this lesson and learned a lot from it.
Hi there. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you all about adverbs. You will learn what is an adverb, what are the different types of adverbs, and how to use adverbs correctly. We will focus on avoiding common mistakes in 2 areas: comparative and superlative forms, and then the very important topic, putting adverbs in the correct position in a sentence. So let's start. Before we begin, as always, if you have any questions at all, just let me know in the comment section below and I will talk to you there. Alright, so to start, let me ask you a question. What is an adverb? Some people say that adverbs are like adjectives. You know adjectives, words like good, bad, beautiful, tall, short, etc. They give information about nouns. So people say that adverbs give information about verbs. Well, that's only half correct. because adverbs are very talented words. They can give us information about verbs, but they can also give us information about adjectives, other adverbs, and even about whole sentences. Now, adverbs are all around us. Words like slowly, unfortunately, very, enough, tomorrow, however, always, and so on and so forth. I'm sure that you use adverbs all the time. But why do we use them? Well, we use adverbs because they answer some important questions about our sentences. Questions like when, where, how much, how often, etc. Take a look at these examples. In number 1, he ate the sandwich quickly. Quickly is the adverb. It gives information about the verb ate. How did he eat the sandwich? He ate it quickly. In number 2, how beautiful is Tammy in that dress? She is really beautiful. It means very beautiful. So the adverb really modifies the adjective beautiful. That means it gives information about the adjective. In number 3, we have an adverb of place. It's the word here, which gives us the answer to the question where. In number 4, we have an adverb of time. It's yesterday, and it tells us when. And in number 5, can you identify the adverb? The adverb is the word sometimes, which answers the question how often. How often do I drink coffee? Every morning? No, only sometimes. So here you see all the different things that adverbs can do. And based on these functions or the different jobs that they do, adverbs are divided into 5 common types. Let's talk about that. Okay, adverbs are usually classified as adverbs of manner, degree, place, time, and frequency. Adverbs of manner tell us how, that is, in what way an action happens. Adverbs of degree tell us how much, very good, really strong, and so on. Adverbs of place and time tell us where and when. And adverbs of frequency tell us how often, always, never, sometimes, etc. Now, there are also many other types such as adverbs of opinion, fortunately, personally, sadly, etc. These help us to express our point of view. And there are also connecting or linking adverbs like moreover, however, on the other hand, or therefore. But the most important adverbs for us are the 5 that we discussed. Okay, at this point, I want to give you an important tip about words that end with ly. When you say adverb, people generally think of words like slowly, quickly, happily, sadly, quietly, loudly, and so on. So it's easy to think that all adverbs end with ly. But this is not true. In this chart, you can see many examples of adverbs that don't end with ly. Also, there are many adjectives that have this ending. Words like friendly, like she's a friendly person, or lovely, what a lovely bouquet, that's a bunch of flowers. These are adjectives and not adverbs. So remember, many adverbs don't end with ly, and some words that end with ly can be adjectives. So now, before we go any further, I want to give you a quick test and check if you can identify adverbs correctly. On the screen, you see 5 sentences, and I want you to identify all the adverbs. You get extra points if you can say what type of adverb. Pause the video now if you want, think about your answers, and then play the video again and check. Okay, how many adverbs did you identify? Let's see. In the first sentence, there are 2 adverbs. There is an adverb of place, and quietly is an adverb of manner. That is, it says how the action happened. Both of these adverbs modify the verb sat. In number 2, the adverb is yesterday. It's an adverb of time. In number 3, there are again 2 adverbs. One is downstairs, an adverb of place, and the second is fast, an adverb of manner. In sentence number 4, the adverb is every day, and it's an adverb of frequency. And in number 5, again 2 adverbs. Well, which is an adverb of manner. It tells us that Camilla speaks English well. And the word quite, which is an adverb of degree. It gives information about well. That is, how well? Quite well. It's like saying very well. So did you get all of the adverbs? All right. Now that you know how to identify adverbs, let's move on and talk about comparative and superlative forms and how to avoid mistakes when using them. When we think of comparative and superlative forms, we usually think of adjectives. More beautiful, less expensive, stronger, higher, etc. But adverbs also have comparatives and superlatives. Now these are very easy, but many people make some common mistakes here. Let's look at a few examples and I'll explain. On the screen, you see 2 sentences. Both of these have comparative adverbs. In the first sentence, can you please speak more loudly? So we've added more to the adverb loudly, and it becomes a comparative that modifies the verb speak. In the same way, in number 2, adults learn things less quickly than children do. That means children learn more quickly and adults learn less quickly. So the comparative adverb less quickly modifies the verb learn. Now these 2 are easy, but here's where people make mistakes. Now you see 2 more examples, but this time I want you to choose the correct comparative form in each sentence. Stop the video if you want, think about your answers, then play the video again and check. Okay, let's discuss them. In number 3, Leon's car goes faster than Benjamin's. Now the word fast can be an adjective if it modifies a noun or pronoun, or it can be an adverb. Like here, it gives information about the verb goes. And the comparative form is always faster. It's not more fast or fastly. Both of those are errors, never say them. And the superlative form of fast is fastest. Like if you want to say, Leon's car goes the fastest. Okay, and in number 4, Amuda sings better than Mary does. This one is a little tricky because if you don't want to compare, normally you would just say, Amuda sings well. Well is the adverb. But in this sentence, we want to compare Amuda's singing with Mary's singing. The comparative form of well is better. It's never more well or more better. Don't say them. And the superlative form of well is best. Did you get both of these right? Okay. Now the important point here is that there are some adverbs which have either ER and EST forms or irregular comparative and superlative forms. You see some of these on the screen. It's a good idea for you to memorize these forms so that you use them correctly. And if you want to learn more about comparative and superlative forms of adjectives, watch my lesson on adjectives in this series. All right, now let's move on to our final topic in this lesson, and that is the position of adverbs in a sentence. Now this is probably where learners of English make the most mistakes with adverbs. Over the years, many of my students have come to me and said, where exactly should I put an adverb in a sentence? It's so confusing. Okay, well first, let me ask you, how many positions can an adverb have in a sentence? The answer is 3. There are three possible positions for an adverb in a sentence. These are beginning, middle, and end. Look at these examples. In the first example, hopefully my wife will be waiting for me at the airport. The adverb is hopefully. It shows my opinion or how I feel, I hope, and it is in the beginning or initial position. This means that the adverb is at the start of the sentence or clause or before the subject. In the next two examples, the adverb is in the middle position, that is between the subject and the main verb. In number 2, the adverb often comes directly after the subject I and before the verb travel. In number 3, the adverb still comes after the helping verb am and before the main verb working. But this is still called the middle position because it's not in the beginning or at the end. And in the last example, you see an adverb in the end position or at the end of the sentence or clause. The adverb beautifully. Okay, so how do you decide where to put an adverb? Well, the bad news is that there are many rules regarding adverb position in English. But thankfully, there's some good news too. And that is that if you know the most important rules, you can avoid the most common mistakes. So let's talk about these rules now. Now, before I give you the rules, I'm going to test how much you know. On the screen, there are 9 sentences, and all 9 sentences are wrong. They have errors in the position of adverbs. The adverbs are underlined. In each sentence, I want you to correct the error by putting the adverb in the correct position. Stop the video, think about your answers, then play the video again and check. All right, let's look at the answers. The first 2 sentences have adverbs of degree in them. In number 1, the sentence should be, Maya looks extremely angry. This is because when an adverb of degree, extremely in this case, modifies an adjective, like angry, the adverb should come first. So adverb first, then adjective. In number 2, the problem is that adverbs of degree, very, really, etc., don't usually go at the beginning. This is just like the last example, but here the adverb really tells us about the verb likes. So the best place to put it is right before the verb. So Lucy really likes pancakes. Sentences 3 and 4 have adverbs of manner. So what about number 3? Here, the adverb carefully is in between the verb placed and the object of the verb, the candles. This is a very important rule. Never put an adverb between a verb and its direct object. A verb that has an object is called a transitive verb, and it loves its object so much, so don't separate them. The best place to put the adverb is before the verb. So Jeremy carefully placed the candles on the cake. In number 4, we have an intransitive verb. That is, the verb laugh does not have an object. You cannot ask laughed who or laughed what. Now, if you don't understand this point, watch my lesson on verbs in this series. Okay, so with intransitive verbs, that is verbs with no object, we put the adverb of manner after the verb. So the audience laughed loudly at the comedian's jokes. And now let's turn to adverbs of frequency. In number 5, what's the problem? Well, the problem is that frequency adverbs, like always and never, usually go in the middle position, that is, between the subject and the verb. So, I never watch horror movies. Now, some frequency adverbs, like sometimes or often, can go at the beginning or end in some situations, but usually we put frequency adverbs in the middle position, before the main verb. Now, that is, except in a sentence like number 6. If the main verb is be or any form of be, am, is, are, was, were, or will be, then the frequency adverb goes after the verb be. So Rashida is sometimes late for work. But this is only for the verb be. All right, what about number 7? Here, notice that there are two verbs. The main verb is carry, but there's also a helping verb, should, which is a modal verb. When there's a helping verb, we usually put adverbs of frequency between the helping and main verbs. So find the two verbs and stick the adverb in the middle. So you should always carry a first aid kit in your car. In number 8, the adverb every year is in the wrong place. It should be at the beginning or at the end of the sentence. It's a little more natural to put it at the end. So I go to my family home for Christmas every year. The rule here is that if you have an adverb of frequency that is definite, meaning it mentions day, week, month, or year, it goes in the beginning or end position. In number 9, the problem is similar. If you have an adverb that says how many times, once, twice, etc., it has to go at the end. It's not common to put it at the beginning or middle. So Marcos has eaten sushi twice. How many of these did you get right? Now, I know that we just looked at a lot of rules. And you know what? These aren't all the rules for adverb position. There are many more in English. But if you know these rules, the rules that we just discussed, you will be able to avoid the most common mistakes. And I promise they will get easier with time and practice. Okay, so in this lesson, we first looked at what is an adverb. Then we discussed the different types of adverbs, adverbs of manner, degree, place, time, and frequency. And then we turned to avoiding common errors, first with comparative and superlative forms of adverbs, and finally with putting adverbs in the correct position in sentences. All right, I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Remember to subscribe to this channel for more free English lessons, and I will see you in another lesson soon.
Hi there, and welcome back to our Parts of Speech series. In this lesson, you're going to learn about conjunctions. We'll first discuss what a conjunction is, and then we'll look at the 4 main types of conjunctions and how to avoid the most common mistake that people make with them. That is, how to punctuate conjunctions correctly in writing. All right, let's begin. As always, if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments section below, and I will talk to you there. Okay, so first, what is a conjunction? A conjunction is a word that connects parts of a sentence. It can connect words, or it can connect phrases, or even clauses. Look at these examples. In number 1, when you go to London, you must try fish and chips. Fish and chips is a popular food in the UK. So here the conjunction and connects 2 words, fish and chips. In the next sentence, my cell phone is either on the table or in the drawer. The conjunction is the combination of either or, and it connects 2 phrases, on the table and in the drawer. And in number 3, can you find the conjunction? The conjunction is but, and it connects 2 clauses. Clauses are just like sentences. Yasmin went to see her manager is the first clause, and the second clause is he wasn't in his office. So you see here that conjunctions can connect any 2 parts of a sentence. All right, so now let's talk about the different types of conjunctions in English. Conjunctions come in 4 major types. Coordinating conjunctions, these are the words and, or, but, so, yet, for, and nor. Subordinating conjunctions like because, after, although, if, until, etc. Correlative conjunctions, these are pairs of conjunctions such as either or, neither nor, not only but also, etc. So in each one, you see two words that always go together. And finally, conjunctive adverbs. These are words like as a result, however, in addition, and therefore. They're adverbs, but they act like conjunctions. That is, they help to join parts of a sentence. Now, don't be scared by all these names. The names are not important. What's important is knowing how to use the conjunctions correctly. Of course, conjunctions are a huge topic, and there are many grammar rules relating to them. So today, we will focus on avoiding the most common type of mistake with conjunctions, and that is punctuating them correctly in writing. We won't be discussing correlative conjunctions because there aren't any special punctuation rules with them, but we will be talking about the other three. So let's start with coordinating conjunctions first. Coordinating conjunctions are probably the most commonly used type of conjunction in English. These are the words and, or, but, so, yet, for, and nor. Now the words for and nor can be used as conjunctions, but they're not used a lot. The word for is used much more as a preposition and not a conjunction. But the other five are very common. All right, let's talk about how to punctuate them correctly. On the screen, there are 4 sentences. You will notice that there are no commas in these. So in all 4 sentences, I want you to put commas wherever necessary. Pause the video and think about your answers, then play the video again and check. Okay, let's look at the answers. In the first 2 sentences, did you put a comma anywhere? Actually, you don't need any commas in these 2 sentences. That's because when a conjunction only connects 2 words or 2 phrases, we don't use commas. In number 1, the conjunction is and it connects the adjectives beautiful and spacious. Only 2 items, so no comma. In number 2, the conjunction is or, and it connects 2 noun phrases, a library and a restaurant. So again, only 2 items, so we don't use a comma. In sentences 3 and 4, commas are required. When we have lists of 3 or more items, we use commas to separate them. In number 3, we need to buy sugar, comma, butter, comma, flour, comma, and vanilla extract for the cake. Notice that there is a conjunction and before the last item, and the comma goes before the conjunction. Similarly, in number 4, there is a list of 3 items: guitar, piano, violin. This time the conjunction is or, and just like in the previous examples, we use commas to separate the items, and the last comma goes before the conjunction. Now there's another very important rule regarding coordinating conjunctions, and that is that when a conjunction connects 2 independent clauses, you should always put a comma after the first clause. Take a look at these examples. Look at sentence number 1. You see here that it has 2 parts. The first part is Abdul gifted his mother an iPad for her birthday. Now, if you read this carefully, you will realize that this can be a complete sentence by itself. So it's called an independent clause. The same is true for the second part, she loved it. This is also a complete sentence, so it's an independent clause as well. So the conjunction and connects 2 independent clauses here. So we put a comma after the first clause and before and. That is the rule. In all of these examples, there are 2 independent clauses connected by a conjunction. In number 2, Kim wanted to work in Paris is the first clause, and the second clause is she couldn't find a job there. The conjunction but connects these clauses and shows contrast. That is, it shows that the 2 clauses are opposites. In number 3, the conjunction or shows that there are two options. We can go to the movies, that's the first option. It's also the first clause. And the second option is we can clean the house. That's the second clause. For number 4, imagine that we're at a restaurant and you ask me, what do you want to eat? And I say, oh, I'm not very hungry. Now that's the reason. So the result is, I'll just have a milkshake. Both of these are independent clauses. Finally, in number 5, you see the conjunction yet. The meaning of this sentence is that Revati is very good at programming, but still she teaches economics. So the word yet is like saying but still. Here the first clause is Revati is an expert at computer programming, and the second clause is she teaches economics. So in all of these sentences, we put a comma after the first clause and before the conjunction. But you have to be careful here. Now have a look at these next two sentences. You see that there is no comma, and this is correct. But can you tell me why there's no comma? It's because in both of these sentences, there's only one clause. In number 6, Mr. Burns is the subject, followed by two verb phrases. Made a bad investment is one verb phrase. Lost all his savings is another verb phrase. Remember the rule, if a conjunction only connects two words or phrases, no comma. It's the same in number 7. The subject is I, then there are two verb phrases. Ordered a t-shirt online 2 weeks ago is the first phrase, and still haven't received it is the second phrase, so no comma. All right, so let's now move on to our next topic and talk about punctuation rules with subordinating conjunctions. Subordinating conjunctions are words like because, unless, before, after, if, etc. But why are these called subordinating? Well, look at this example. After Louisa gets home from work. Is this a complete sentence? It's not, because it has the word after in it. If we remove it, the sentence can stand alone. Louisa gets home from work. It's fine. But if I say after Louisa gets home from work, you will ask, okay, then what? What does she do? So you see the sentence isn't complete. Thus, this is a dependent clause, which is also called a subordinate clause. The conjunction after makes it a subordinate or dependent clause, so after is called a subordinating conjunction. To complete the sentence, we can add an independent clause. So, after Louisa gets home from work, she likes to watch TV for an hour. All right, now look at these examples. You see 3 pairs of sentences. In each pair, sentence A and sentence B mean the same thing. But notice that sentences A have a comma, but sentences B don't have a comma. And this is correct. I want you to look at these examples carefully and then say why there's a comma in A but no comma in B. Stop the video if you want, think about it, then play the video again and check. Okay, here's the rule. When you connect a dependent clause and an independent clause, if you put the dependent clause first, you put a comma after it. If the independent clause goes first, no comma. That symbol means no comma. So in all of these, in sentences A, what comes first is a dependent or subordinate clause, meaning it's not a full sentence. So we put a comma after it. In sentences B, the first clause is independent. The dependent clause comes second, so no comma. This is an important rule, so don't forget it. Okay, now finally, let's turn to punctuation rules with conjunctive adverbs. Now you might be thinking, why are we talking about adverbs in a conjunctions lesson? Well, the reason is that some adverbs act like conjunctions, so we call them conjunctive adverbs. These are words like however, therefore, as a result, otherwise, moreover, and so on. Here are some examples. You see that there's no punctuation inside the sentences. That's because I wanted to ask you, how should I punctuate these sentences? Should I put commas? Where should I put them? If you want, stop the video, think about it, then play the video again and check. All right, here's the correct punctuation. What do you see? Well, you see that there are both commas and semicolons. This is a special rule of using conjunctive adverbs. Take the first sentence. There are two clauses. The first is Zach loves living in San Francisco. The second is his wife hates the traffic and the pollution. Notice that both of these are independent clauses. That is, they are full sentences. Conjunctive adverbs are generally used to connect independent clauses. The word however has almost the same meaning as but. You can actually say Zach loves living in San Francisco, but his wife hates the traffic and the pollution. The meaning is the same. The difference is that however is more formal and the punctuation rules are different. Can you see the difference? With but, we only use a single comma before it. With however, or any conjunctive adverb, the most common way to punctuate them is with a semicolon before and a comma after. You can see this in all of the sentences. There's another way to write them. You can also write them with a period or full stop in front. If you do this, you end the first sentence and then start a new sentence with the conjunctive adverb. That's also correct. And you can write it this way for all of the conjunctive adverbs, therefore, moreover, etc. Sometimes you will see the conjunctive adverb in the middle or end position, like you see on the screen now. All of these mean the same thing. Notice that when however is in the middle, it is interrupting the sentence. So we put a comma before and after to make it easy to read. Now, if these rules are a little confusing, don't worry. You will get them with practice. But with conjunctive adverbs, make sure to remember the most important rule. Semicolon or period before. The period is also called a full stop in British English, and comma after. All right, now let's do a quick recap of all the rules that we've learned in this lesson, and then I will give you a test to see if you can punctuate conjunctions correctly. Rule number 1. If a conjunction only connects two words or phrases, no comma. Rule number 2. In lists of 3 or more items, put a comma after each item except the last. Put the last comma before the conjunction. Rule number 3. When connecting two independent clauses with a conjunction, always put a comma after the first clause. Rule number 4. When connecting a dependent clause to an independent clause, if the dependent clause comes first, put a comma after it. If the independent clause comes first, no comma. And finally, rule number 5. When using conjunctive adverbs, either put a semicolon before and a comma after the adverb, or a period before and a comma after. All right, now it's time for the test. On the screen, there are 8 sentences, and I want you to punctuate them with commas and semicolons where necessary. Stop the video if you want, think about your answers, then play the video again and check. All right, let's look at the answers. In sentence number 1, commas have to go after English and Spanish. This is a list with 3 items, so we put commas after each item except the last. Remember that the last comma goes before the conjunction and. But in sentence number 2, you don't need any commas. This is because and only connects 2 items here. Tuesday, and Wednesday. In number 3, there are 2 clauses. The first is, we didn't know it was going to rain. Then there's the conjunction so, and then the second clause, we didn't bring our umbrellas. Both of these clauses are independent, meaning that they can stand alone as sentences. For this reason, we put a comma after the first clause. What about number 4? In this sentence, you need no commas. Notice that the conjunction is but. You might think that it's connecting 2 clauses here, but that's not the case. There's only one subject, Lamar, with 2 verb phrases. Got job offers from 4 different companies and didn't accept any of them. So the conjunction is just connecting 2 phrases, and that's why no comma. In number 5, we have 2 clauses. The first clause, when you see Shelley, is a dependent clause because it's not a full sentence. The second clause, can you tell her to come and see me, is independent. Yes, it's a question, but still it's a complete, meaningful sentence. So what comes first is the dependent clause with the conjunction when. For this reason, we put a comma after it. What about number 6? Comma or no comma? Well, how many clauses do you see? There are 2. One is independent and the other is dependent. The first clause, I can't log in, is the independent clause because it's complete. But the second clause, because I can't remember my password, is dependent because it's not complete. Which comes first? The independent clause. So no comma. This sentence is the opposite case to the previous example. Remember, only if the dependent clause comes first, we put a comma after it. In sentences 7 and 8, notice that we have conjunctive adverbs. However, in 7 and therefore in 8. So what's the rule with conjunctive adverbs? The rule is semicolon before and comma after. You see this in number 7. Another way to punctuate conjunctive adverbs is with a period before and a comma after. You can see this now with number 8. Both forms are correct. All right, how many did you get right? Let me know in the comments. If you liked this lesson, share it with your friends.